Hi, I'm Martin Kelly of Friends Journal, and today I have with me Brent Bill. Hi, Brent.
Hi, Martin. It's good to see you. I mean, even though it's virtually, it's been a
It,
while.
it, it has been a while. Um, so Brent has an article or a short story in the November issue of Friends Journal called "A Trip to Amity." And let me just introduce you here. J. Brent Bill is a writer, photographer, retreat leader, writing coach, and Quaker minister. It's a lot of hats you wear. Um, he's written and co-written many books, including Hope and Witness in Dangerous Times, Holy Silence, and Life Lessons from a Bad Quaker. And his most recent book, just coming out this month, is Amity Stories from the Heartland. And he graduated from Wilmington College and Earlham School of Religion and is a member of West Newton Meeting in Indiana. So, yes, you do a lot here. How do you find the time?
Well, it helps to be retired,
Yeah,
from any gainful employment. So I just do the things I want to do now, of course. And I live on a almost 50-acre former farm that's now a wildlife preserve. So
that's right.
the farm life keeps me busy too.
Yeah, that would. Yeah, I looked up and Goodreads says you have 28 books, 28
Wow.
titles with your name on there.
Uh,
That's a lot. So how do
yeah.
you so I guess we should just without spoilers just say this is a story of a Quaker or of a not Quaker, but of a minister who's a fill-in minister. Is that sort of his role? I don't know if there's a name for this.
Well, in this case, he's filling in. Yeah, he's in the Lutheran tradition. There are folks um, who can be visiting ministers, as part of their job, sort of like in pastoral friends, yearly meeting superintendents or other staff might be available for what's called pulpit supply.
Pulpit supply.
So if somebody's on vacation, here's a list of officials or people you might want to ask, and so this fellow is one of those in the story. He's a Lutheran version of that. That's because of his position, gets asked to fill in at places.
Right. And well, we won't spoil it, but we can just sort of do the little bit of the setup that
Hmm.
here's this minister, he's pulpit supply, he's going to a church and he's running late. And
Yes.
he's blaming his wife for running late and he's getting all anxious. And it's full of the most delightful dialogue and
Oh,
tension and
thanks.
internal story. Like I really felt like tense as I was reading it. I felt like, I'm the kid in the backseat of the car and mom and dad are fighting. So how do you get that kind of storytelling that's so relatable.
Well, I think one of my strengths as a writer, even in nonfiction, has been as a person who can communicate story and do it visually. I teach a class called Writing from the Heart. And one of the things it talks about is how to include the appropriate uh, level of feeling
Mm, mhm.
without getting sappy, but also part of that class is writing from the body, thinking about all the sensory details that a story really needs. Because, I mean, we don't just want to be told something; we want to experience it. So to try and weave as much sensory detail in as can really help the reader see what I am trying to write, I think is something I've learned to do over the years, and I think that's even in oral storytelling, you want to do those kind of things, and so I think that that's part of it. It's just enough detail. I mean, it's a pretty short story, so there's not a lot of room to talk about emotions or whatever other than the ones that are right on the surface. So you can add other details, such as folks who read the story know, it's a hot summer day,
Mhm.
and uh, and so what's a hot summer day in the Midwest like? Just to filter some of those things in there that can help bring it alive.
And so this is the first of the stories. How many stories are there in the new book?
there are 11 stories in the book, and not I'll do the here's the
There
cover.
we go. Very good. That's great.
um, the and they are all over the map, not geographically, but as far as kind of stories. The next story in the book is about a woman in the 1930s who wishes she knew how to drive
Mm.
and wants to learn how to drive. Um, and then there's uh, a fifth grader who's going to go to Sunday school for the first time. And then
Mm.
there's a couple stories about one's about a Catholic priest, another about an Episcopal priest. There are a few stories where some of the characters repeat a few times. So they're not necessarily continuations of the first story, but the woman who learns how to drive, her name wants to learn how to drive. Her name's Mrs. Henry.
Mm.
Um, and so she and her husband appear in a later story 20 years later, and then she appears in one 20 years after that. So uh, some of those characters reappear. And then, uh, not to do too much of a spoiler, but the characters in the first story, A Trip to Amity, which is the article that's in Friends Journal, reappear in the final story in the book.
Oh, oh, good. Now I do want to read the book to see what happens the next.
So
Yeah. Um, so how do you come up with stories like this? What's your process? Is there a specific process, or does it just come from everywhere?
no, I don't have a specific process so much. I mean, I love stories and I love hearing stories. And so some of these have come from family stories, frankly, over the years that I've thought, well, I wonder what else is behind that other than a fun story at Thanksgiving or Christmas that we heard, the fun parts of it.
Yeah.
What about uh, the people who were involved and what did they really feel, especially if in some ways they were sort of the brunt of the story, the joke.
Right.
So what was it like? And so um, the second story actually involves an incident that happened to my grandmother. Um, and so that's what, instead of telling, as I began to write that, I wanted to really try and figure out, okay, so I'm a white fellow. And when I first started writing it, I was in my 50s. Uh, what's a woman in the 1930s?
Mm.
Uh, how, what's it like for her
Yeah.
in a very patriarchal society? And so forth. And so it was just fun to try and turn some of these stories on their head. And some of them are combinations of stories. I mean, and others are just flat out made up. It's just like
Mhm.
from experiences that I've experienced of different events. But I thought, now what would it be like to be an outsider and be in that event? Not one of those who's in the know and part of the in group in it. So just playing around.
Yeah. I'm curious because you've written lots of different types of books, and how does this differ from a book like Holy Silence? It's sort of a more straight ahead book. Is there kind of a purpose to storytelling? These kind of solo storytellings? Is it just to delight, or is there more to it for you?
Well, I think there's more to it, but I mean, the main reason I do want to write that I enjoy short story is I find them delightful, especially well written ones. It at just at that level, just enjoyment.
Hmm.
Um, and so to think of crafting a story that people will enjoy, there's not necessarily a particular message, unlike Holy Silence, where the theme runs through about the importance of Quaker silence in our lives and learning to carry it through our lives, and then trying to amplify that through the whole book, and do some teaching without seeming like being a teacher.
Yeah, not
Even
straight
even
didactic,
that,
you know.
yeah, that book I try and most of my nonfiction I try to write as a fellow traveler,
Mm,
a fellow pilgrim on this path. But with these stories, I thought, this world is so in need of redemption and good news. And I once heard the writer William Zinsser, who wrote one of the classic writing books on writing well.
mm,
And I did not know that he was a person of faith until I met him at a conference. But one of the things he said in a writing workshop for those of us who wanted to do spiritual writing was saying that uh, it's important that we tell good stories. There's enough bad stories,
yeah.
and as a person of faith, you should be writing redemptive stories. And so I think the story, the trip to Amity, is ultimately redemptive, even while being humorous at times and very uncomfortable at other times. Um, and the whole idea of the book and that story is in the title, the a trip to Amity. It's not just a trip to the town of
Mhm.
Amity, but it is back to reconciliation and harmony, the meaning of that lies behind Amity. And so all the stories in Amity are ultimately about some kind of reconciliation, redemption, uh, future possibility, whatever.
Mhm. That's wonderful. Do you have any suggestions for writers today or potential writers? It seems just finding publishing house is harder than ever, and
Yeah.
breaking in is harder than ever. What about someone who wants to do this again? The French Journal now has a fiction issue once a year
Yeah.
we've been doing, so we're helping out. But what could someone watching this take
Well,
away?
I think it is really depending on the kind of writing. Fiction is especially hard to break in as somebody who's not known as a writer, and there are fewer and fewer markets. I mean, I um, there used to be so many just general interest magazines that published fiction. I mean, if you even watch old movies, like on Turner Classic Movies or whatever,
Mhm.
you often see based on a short story that was originally in the Saturday Evening Post or Harper's, or and Quaker writer Jessamine West, her most famous book among friends anyhow, The Friendly Persuasion, those all started as short stories that she submitted and then wove together into the book. um, but of course now there are places like Substack
Mhm.
and other blogs, and a lot of folks are using that to test stories and to test story ideas and to get the word out.
Mhm.
But then there's still a fair number of smaller journals uh, that you can find online who are publishing fiction,
Mhm.
and to query them is always a good thing. The bad thing about some of them is they're often running writers, uh, uh, like short story contest, and they want you to pay to submit your story, which is, if you really believe in it, then that's a good thing. But here in Indiana, there's all kinds of little journals that publish regional fiction. So
So there are opportunities, but you might have to
yeah,
around a little bit more.
yeah, and when I submitted the proposal for Amity, even though I just found out I have 28 titles,
Yeah.
um, this was out of my wheelhouse, and it made the publisher nervous
Mm,
because, for one, short story collections are hard to sell, especially from um, a first time collection,
mhm,
and uh, So this is I had to convince them that I would do the marketing necessarily to help sell the book too, because marketing today, as opposed to when I published my first book in 1984 with a publisher, is completely different.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure.
mean, I do so much more on, I have to do so much more contact of people and reviewers and places to speak. Where when my first book came out, I just got to sit back and go where I was told, or log into whatever radio station, be interviewed, those sorts of things.
Yeah, well, I started in book publishing in the early 90s, and I remember a small publisher, and I remember active authors were always like a joy and always
Yeah.
got it out so much further than the rest of us. So I'm glad you're doing this. Or do you have any kind of tour happening, or how can we find out? Are you
Yeah.
going to be on Letterman, next week? And
I I always wanted to be on Letterman since he's from just up the road here. Um, I'm doing some mini stuff.
Mhm.
Um, doing some readings around Indiana and Ohio right now.
Oh, great,
Have done a couple of library events, and we'll be doing. Uh, there's a major Indiana Authors Fair at the holidays for the Historical Society puts on.
okay,
Then in Ohio in the spring, I'll be at the Ohioana Library, which is the library that collects all Ohio related authors, which is where I grew up. So I'll be at that book fair. But I am starting to start book some places after the first of the year to get out, do some readings and signings. Um, so those are often posted on my Facebook page when I've got something lined up. So
that's how we can follow it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
great.
and on Instagram too. So
Super. And so, where should people order the book from? I guess it'll be available everywhere. Is there a special spot you'd like people to order from?
well, a spot that's dear to my heart is Quaker Books of FGC.
All right.
And it is so dear that I made arrangements with a publisher that even though the book's not officially out until December 1st, Quaker Books of FGC has copies for sale right now.
Wonderful. Great.
So you can get your copy now. And of course, I uh, signed copies can be ordered through my website, brentbill.com.
Great.
Uh, uh, just reach out to me there and I can give folks how to get an autograph copy.
Sure. That's great. Well, thank you for writing this. I'm really glad we were
Oh,
able to share it. And I saw your name come through, and I was like, "Oh, this is wonderful!" And like I say, got attention, and then had the laugh at the reveal there. And it's a great story. So I'm glad we could help
well,
there. And I guess at some point we have to review this book too. I don't know if we've gotten a review copy, so we'll have to.
you're on the list and it said it was sent out. So I'm
Okay.
hoping it was. But yeah, this story, uh, these some of the stories in the book are not new
Mhm.
in the sense that I've been working on them for years, and this one I've been working on since about 25 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Now the closing story that has the same couple
Mm.
was written last year. So
You've been
uh,
living with them for a while
yeah,
with these characters. Great. Well,
yeah.
thanks, Brent. Thanks for coming on, and
Oh, thank
glad
you
to have
for
you on.
having me.